Hi everyone, and welcome to the Windows Server Summit. This session is on the Microsoft options for VMware migration. More and more, customers are exploring new virtualization options to run their workloads. My name is Dan Cuomo, and along with Jeff Woolsey, we'll cover the 4 options Microsoft provides for customers who are exploring options for migration. We'll also cover common use cases, the benefits of each of the options provided, and demonstrate a new migration tool that can be used to expedite your migration. Let's get started. Microsoft provides several options for migration from your current virtualization provider, whether your immediate destination is in the cloud or on-premises. If you're looking for in-cloud options, you can use Azure VMware Solution or modernize your workloads using Azure Native IaaS or PaaS services. If your workloads must remain on-premises, we recommend using Azure Local, our premier offering for hyperconverged workloads that can't move to the cloud. If none of these previous options meet your requirements, Windows Server is an Arc-enabled platform that underpins our hyperscale cloud and is available to run your on-premises workloads in your data center. Now let's deep dive into each of these to understand their benefits, when to use them, and how to get started on your migration.
Thanks, Dan. Let's start with the Azure VMware Solution. So as Dan mentioned, we've got a couple cloud solutions, we've got a couple of on-prem solutions. Let's start in the cloud with Azure VMware Solution. So a couple quick things to point out right up front is, why do customers use the Azure VMware Solution? And we're seeing lots of adoption for a variety of reasons. Licensing concerns, we're seeing data center licenses, urgent capacity needs, people that want to avoid a hardware and software refresh. For example, we've seen cases where a customer needs to get out of a data center by the end of the year. They've got thousands of virtual machines and they need a safe landing zone. Azure VMware Solution can be a perfect example. It also gives you the ability to, once you move applications into the cloud on AVS, you can then extend and scale those apps and actually interface even better with other Azure cloud services. Now, when I talk about migration, just to point out what we're talking about here is, we're talking about the fact that on premises, you're running a VMware stack. You're running ESX, vSAN, maybe you're running NSX. And so in moving it to the Azure VMware Solution, the Azure VMware Solution is a full VMware stack. Just want to be super clear about this. It's ESX, it's NSX, it's vSAN, and it's directly running on bare metal, but it's running in the Azure cloud on our hardware. And we deliver it as a service. So we manage the hardware, we manage the licensing, we manage the patch management, we manage the underlying infrastructure. This allows you to focus on your virtual machines, your applications that are important to you. So use the VMware HCX tool. That's how you migrate it to the cloud. And by the way, there's no conversion, there's no refactoring, because you're still running a VMware VM. You've just moved that location. Well, now that you've done that, now you can modernize those applications, you can interface them with cloud services and so much more. So as I mentioned, AVS is an Azure service. So we've got a number of different options, 36 cores, 52 cores, 64 cores, with varying sizes of RAM, from 768 to 1.5 terabytes, with all sorts of storage, 20 terabytes, 19 terabytes, 40 terabytes, lots of super fast flash storage for you. And again, we handle the license. So, you are making your licensing with us. We'll handle the licensing with VMware. And there's a real big benefit to this, because number one, when it comes to Azure VMware benefits, you're migrating that VM as is. There's no changing, there's no refactoring. And you get to continue to use all of your existing skills and tools. So for example, you're familiar, you're comfortable, you like vCenter, well, that's exactly what you're going to use to manage AVS running in the cloud. Now, from a pricing perspective, one of the things that customers will tell us is they're a little concerned, what if the price changes again? Well, that's okay, because with the AVS solution, you can do what we call reserved instances. We have 1, 3, and 5-year reserved instances. With a 5-year reserved instance, you are locking in the price with Microsoft. So if that price changes, next year or the year after that, guess what? Microsoft eats the cost, you don't, because we locked in that price with you. And so you don't need to worry about subscriptions or anything like that. We'll take care of that for you. So that's the Azure VMware Solution. Now, another cloud way to migrate workloads is to actually go Azure Cloudnative. And I don't mean lift and shift per se, okay? Because there's a lot of different ways you can go cloud native, whether it's PaaS, SaaS, or IaaS. And here are some popular cloud migrations. For example, Exchange to M365, SharePoint to M365. These are extremely popular and common cloud migrations where people are saying, you know what, do I really need to run my mail on premises anymore? I'd rather not have to deal with the storage and the configuring and the updating and the patch management and all of capacity. I don't want to deal with any of that. If I move this to M365, guess what? Microsoft just handles all of that for me, and all I have to do is manage user accounts. So we see that for both Exchange and SharePoint. We also see that for Dynamics. Customers going, you know, I need CRM, but do I really need it on premises? Let's move that into Dynamics 365 so I can focus on the actual CRM and the actual organization's needs and my customers' needs instead of just, managing and updating and dealing with Dynamics on premises. So Dynamics 365 is a great way to do that. And then finally, web apps. You can move those into Azure App Services. So these are a number of popular cloud migrations. Now, I should also point out, if you wanted to do a VMware migration into Azure IaaS, or what we call Azure VMs, then we have the tool called the Azure Migrate tool. And the Azure Migrate tool actually does more than just virtual machines. It actually does things like SQL databases. So for example, if I have a SQL database running on a physical machine or on a virtual machine, doesn't matter, it's a SQL server, I can use the Azure Migrate tool to migrate that into Azure SQL, into our Cloudnative solution. So we take care of that for you. If you want to move web apps to the app services, guess what? We can do that through the Azure Migrate tool. We can also, of course, do migrations from VMware virtual machines into Azure virtual machines running in the cloud. And we do this in an agentless way. We deploy and configure the Azure Migrate appliance for VMware. We do the server discovery. We start replicating your Windows and Linux server VMs. We then use the Azure Migrate appliance to orchestrate the replication of your VM data to your Azure subscription. And then we can perform test migrations. It is optional, but it is highly recommended. And you can do this in a sandbox environment to make sure everything is working great and you validate the migration. So it's very, very powerful. And then you migrate to Azure with zero data loss and minimal downtime. So that's the awesomeness that is moving to cloud native. Now, of course, we start moving to on-premises. So I've mentioned Azure VMware Solution, I've mentioned Azure Cloud Native, and if you need to run an on-premises solution, we have Azure Local. Now, Azure Local represents really us doubling down in our investments on premises. We believe that there are many durable scenarios for distributed local infrastructure, whether it's retail, like loss prevention, whether it's mission critical business continuity, like factories, warehouses, stadiums, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's financial infrastructure, whether it's government, whether it's military, whether it's utilities. There's lots of reasons why folks say, look, I have stuff that's going to stay on premises for the foreseeable future. Sure, I'm moving stuff to the cloud, but there's always going to be some sort of durable footprint on-prem. Great. We've got a great solution, and that's Azure Local. Azure Local gives you the ability to run all of your existing apps with full-featured general-purpose virtual machines. You need to run Windows, you need to run Linux, you need to run FreeBSD Unix. We got you covered, okay? And because it's running on hardware on your premises, it's running locally, but it is managed from the cloud. You can even run marketplace images from the Azure Marketplace on Azure Local because it's an Azure property. And you're using the same familiar Azure portal for all of your management. Now, in addition to virtual machines that, to handle your existing applications today, we of course have the Azure Kubernetes service built in and included, which allows you to run your new applications. So as you're building new cloud native applications using containers, for example, AKS gives you that ability to deploy those on premises on Azure Local. What we generally see is developers like to deploy into the cloud on AKS, but again, very often you're going to need to deploy it on premises as well. Well, no problem. Simply tell your developers, hey, you're going to target a different target, AKS on Azure Local, and boom, you're deploying there as well. Now, one common question is, well, how do I migrate from VMware to Azure Local? Well, again, Azure Local is an Azure property, so we use the same Azure Migrate tool that I mentioned earlier. Now, I do want to point out this doesn't go to the cloud and back. This actually goes directly from VMware to Azure Local, but this allows you to replicate on-premises to on-premises and quickly get you from VMware to Azure Local. Really, really awesome tool, and we're making massive investments in Azure Migrate. Finally, there are some additional Azure Local benefits, such as extended security updates that are included. This is huge. Folks, I have customers that come to me and speak to me, and they tell me, look, I'm spending 6, 7 digits on ESUs for older versions of server. Guess what? Please don't do that. Go to your favorite partner, go to your favorite OEM, go to your favorite your hardware partner and say, look, I would like Azure Local, and instead of spending 6 or 7 digits on ESUs to Microsoft, write that check to your hardware partner, get a brand new Azure Local system, get $1 million of new hardware, and guess what? You'll get those same ESUs. It's the biggest no-brainer in the history of man. I can pay for ESUs, or I can buy hardware and get those same ESUs. Think fast, folks. It's not a trick. Hot patching is also included with Windows Server Azure Edition if you're running on Azure Local at no additional cost. So that's another benefit. And you have the option to use Azure Cloud services such as Azure Virtual Desktop, Video Indexer. We have a local AI search that's currently in private preview, as well as machine learning. So that's Azure VMware Solution, that's Azure Cloud Native, and that's Azure Local. Now I'm going to pass it back on over to Dan to talk about Windows Server Hyper-V.
Thanks, Jeff. Windows Server with Hyper-V is a great option for customers who have a variety of server hardware boasting a massive support catalog. That means you'll be able to leverage your existing servers. In addition, Windows Server supports a variety of storage options, including SAN, NAS, hyperconverged, or local storage for the workloads today. Hyper-V is a robust virtualization platform that is critical to Microsoft. Hyper-V and Windows Server underpins our largest cloud properties, including Azure, Microsoft 365, and Azure SQL. It's the basis for the Azure Local product family. It runs in the billions of devices using Windows Server and Windows Client. We use it for containers with Hyper-V isolation. It's the basis for platform security on each of these properties. And we even use it in Xbox. So Hyper-V is a mature and robust technology that supports a demanding list of Microsoft technologies. To meet the demands of these technologies, we've increased the scalability limits of Hyper-V in Windows Server 2025. We now support 4 petabytes of RAM and 2048 logical processors in the host, and a single VM can have up to 240 terabytes of RAM and 2048 virtual processors. This sort of scale ensures that your largest workloads can run on Windows Server. But we didn't stop there. We also brought GPU partitioning, enabling you to share a GPU across multiple virtual machines with support for live migration and high availability. Hyper-V is also now aware of differences between processor generations and can maximize the performance on these systems and supports clustering without the need for Active Directory. Network ATC, Network HUD, and accelerated networking are a whole host of new networking features designed to simplify deployment, increase reliability, and improve network performance. Our resilient file system, or REFS, is designed for large enterprise workloads and now supports data deduplication and compression. We've even made some management improvements, like enabling Generation 2 VMs by default and increase the responsiveness of the VM management tools in Windows Admin Center. In addition, our Windows Admin Center management tool has been greatly improved as well. It now uses .NET Core 8, ASP.NET Kestrel, and supports HTTP2, enabling better scalability. It supports the new features like GPU partitioning and Network ATC mentioned earlier, and will continue to receive improvements as we'll show shortly. But before we take a look at what is coming next, Jeff's going to show us a demo of Windows Admin Center managing a GPU partition on Hyper-V in Windows Server 2025. Take it away, Jeff.
Thanks, Dan.
Windows Server 2025 is the most secure, highest quality release with the easiest upgrades ever. It offers a modern look and feel with the tools to make you productive, like Windows Terminal and Winget package management. With Winget, I can search for critical apps like SQL Server or tools for diagnostics and management like sysinternals and Windows Admin Center, and install directly or script with automation. Speaking of Windows Admin Center, we're announcing the release of version 2 that can be used in Azure and on-premises. One popular use for Windows Admin Center is managing Hyper-V virtual machines. Here's a Hyper-V host running a variety of VMs, including Windows 11 VMs with GPU partitioning. GPU-P allows you to divide a physical GPU among virtual machines and ensures predictable performance and secure isolation. Here, I have a VM running at the bottom with a partition of the GPU assigned to it, and it's achieving about 40 frames per second. The VM is currently running on the server in the upper left corner, and I'm in the process of live migrating it to the server in the upper right corner. You can see the CPU utilization drop on the left as the VM seamlessly live migrates from server to server without disrupting the video. Windows Server 2025, delivering GPU partitioning and seamless live migration without missing a beat.
So I hope you enjoyed that cool new demo of Windows Admin Center. It's gotten lots of performance and lots of improvements, lots of new feature support for Windows Server 2025. However, I will say we've had a lot of requests for something very specific. We've been asked quite simply, Microsoft, we need a VMware conversion tool. So let me pass it to Priya to tell us a little bit about what we've been working on here. Priya?
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. This is Priya Satheesh, and I'm from the Windows Server team. And today I'm very excited to talk about a VM conversion tool that we are introducing as part of Windows Admin Center. And this is going to be our first party tool that's going to enable conversion from ESXi host to an Hyper-V host. So this is going to be one of an additional extension that we plan to roll out as part of Windows Admin Center. And the key highlight of this tool, it's all going to be a online replication tool with minimal downtime. And this is going to have a very low footprint without any additional agents or appliance that need to be installed on the environment to get started with. And it's going to be OS agnostic, so it's going to support both virtual machines running Windows OS or Linux OS just the same. So we're going to get into a quick demo. I'm going to show you how this tool works, and yeah, let's get into the demo. So here I have logged into a Windows Admin Center, and I have the Windows Server 2025 server on which I have the VM extension running. So I've logged into the vCenter, and you see that all the virtual machines in the vCenter are auto discovered, and the complete inventory shows up here. So, and I'm going to do a quick switch over to the vCenter to show you where I've been connected to. So this is the vCenter that I've connected to, and it has a bunch of ESXi hosts, and then the virtual machines running on these ESXi hosts. So I go back to the virtual machine that I plan to migrate today. I look up that virtual machine, and here I see that, and I log in. And right now, this machine is all up and running. It's online, and it has its workload, running as we are planning to do the data replication. So I switch back to the Windows Admin Center. I select the virtual machine that I just showed you in the vCenter, and then I hit on synchronize. So synchronize gets kicked off to the part that's mentioned there, and we do a few pre-checks before the actual synchronization gets kicked off. The synchronization is going to do the data replication of the virtual machine from the source to the destination server. And all of this, you'll be able to see on the UX, the progress of the replication happening as you see in this UX. And you'll also be able to see the replication data in the path that was mentioned earlier in the workflow. As part of this conversion, we are also building a log file. So in case there is a failure, or if this process gets stalled, or if there is an error that happens, you will always be able to get to the log file and see what the exact error message, and will be able to troubleshoot and then restart the replication from where it left off. So you see that this replication is going forward, and like I said, the key highlight is all of this is done when the virtual machine is all up and running. So we're just going to give it a minute. This is the conversion log that I mentioned. It's going to be available for later use or for any auditing purposes. So once the replication is completed, you'll see the virtual machine in the Migrate tab. We are going to initiate the Migrate workflow, and here you go. It's going to do the Delta replication. Once the Delta replication is done, it's going to turn off the virtual machine, and then it's going to do one more instance of the Delta replication to get in all the last changes that happened in the VM, and then the cutover happens. So this is the only point in this workflow when the virtual machine is actually turned off. So this is going to be a very short duration, depending on the size of the VM. This is going to be the offline time. And then the VM comes up on the Hyper-V. So I'm going to show you that the VM is migrated by connecting through the Hyper-V manager. There you see the new VM up and running. I'm able to connect to it through the Hyper-V, and also I can go back to the virtual machine manager in Windows Admin Center and be able to manage all the lifecycle operations that I would do for any other virtual machine through Windows Admin Center. So that shows us an end-to-end cycle of migration of a virtual machine from an ESXi host to a Windows server, and also the lifecycle operations post-migration can be taken over through Windows Admin Center. So we are super, super excited by this new workflow that we are introducing in Windows Admin Center, and we are looking forward for feedback from partners and other customers who are going to get this as after this Windows Server Summit. Let's talk about the timeline. So the private preview is going to be with the Server Summit. The public preview is targeted in summer. And then we have the GA tentatively planned around the winter of end of this year. So that's a rough timeline. I hope to hear back from all of you on this conversion tool. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Priya. Now we're going to show you a sneak peek at one of the new improvements we're making in Windows Admin Center to continue to improve the management of virtualization infrastructure and workloads. Here's Windows Admin Center. On the left-hand side, we have a grouping we're calling Data Center 1 and another called Data Center. As we expand the hierarchy, there are multiple hosts and clusters and standalone nodes running Hyper-V. When you click on one of those objects, you can see a familiar screen like what you have already in Windows Admin Center today. Stay tuned for more improvements to Windows Admin Center and virtualization management.
Awesome, Dan. Really awesome. So speaking of management, and thanks for that sneak peek of the next wave of Windows Admin Center, let's talk briefly about on-premises management. So as Dan and I have mentioned before, Azure Local and Windows Server, they use the same core underlying stack. It's the same hypervisor, it's the same storage stack, it's the same networking stack, it's the same, it's all the same there. The difference is largely management. And if you look at Azure Local, that's managed on the left, you'll notice that's using a web browser. That's using, the Azure portal. On the right-hand side, to manage my on-premises, again, this is my physical hardware. If I'm managing a Windows Server cluster, that's not done from Azure, that's done from Windows Admin Center, okay? And so if you need to manage that physical cluster, that's Windows Admin Center. Now, I want to point out, this is, again, the hardware layer. Whether you're using Azure Local or Windows Server as the underlying hypervisor, we do recommend that the best practice for managing the virtual machines running on top of it is to ARC enable all of those servers. And once you do that, you have a consistent way to manage all of your applications wherever they reside, whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, whether it's across multiple sites or distribution points around the world, whether it's in another cloud. Once you ARC enable a server, you can use it for inventory management. You can protect all of your endpoints with Microsoft Defender. You can monitor the health and performance of your applications with Azure Monitor. You can use Microsoft Sentinel for SIEM security. Azure Policy to provide consistent governance and policy to all of your applications, again, wherever they reside. Update Manager to actually deliver patches, including the new hot patching in Windows Server 2025 and Azure Automation. Now, we are so bullish and we are seeing so many customers that are adopting Azure Arc and loving it that we wanted to make it even easier. And in fact, at Ignite just a few months ago, our CEO, Satya Nadella, actually announced we have a whole bunch of new software assurance benefits with Azure Arc. So if you're a software assurance customer, we are now delivering a whole bunch of new services like Azure Change Tracking and Inventory, Update Manager, Azure Policy Guest Machine Configuration, Windows Admin Center and Azure for Arc, Network HUD and ExcelNet. This is all part of your software assurance benefit. So this is a huge win. And again, just shows you how bullish we are on Azure Arc. So Dan, let me pass it to you to talk a little bit about some of the on-premises licensing questions.
Thanks again, Jeff. And as Jeff mentioned, we're starting to get a lot of questions about licensing of our on-premises offerings. Now, by default, Azure Local is $10 per month per physical processor core. However, if you're a software assurance customer, the cost of that Azure Local OS goes from $10 per month per physical core to $0 per physical core. That's right, it's included in your software assurance benefits. As for Windows Server, customers typically have several questions. The first is, well, that you don't need to buy Hyper-V separately. If you own Windows Server, you already own and are licensed to run Hyper-V. Next, many of you already have licenses for your Windows Server guests running on another virtualization platform like VMware. A subset of those data center licenses can be moved to the physical host when installing Windows Server in place of your VMware environment. The license will then cover both the host and the guest. That's right, you can use the licenses you've already purchased and license both the host and guest for a big savings. In this model, we do not charge based on usage. You can run as many virtual machines as the hardware can support. And finally, Hyper-V excels at running both Windows and Linux workloads. To license the Linux workloads, ensure you're working with your distribution vendor. For Windows Server VMs, the number of VMs licensed is dependent on the edition you have on the host. If you're running Windows Server Data Center on the host, all the Windows Server virtual machines are already licensed. If you're running Windows Server Standard on the host, you're licensed to run 2 Windows Server virtual machines per standard license. And that's it for licensing. Jeff, why don't you take us home?
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So we've covered in a short amount of time here the multiple Microsoft options for VMware migration. There's the Azure VMware Solution. There's Azure Cloudnative with IaaS and PaaS and SaaS, Azure Local and Windows Server. Again, Azure VMware Solution is great for those customers, that are looking for a fast solution. You need to get out of a data center and you want to retain your existing skills, your existing tools. You're already comfortable with VMware vCenter. Great, we've got you covered with the Azure VMware Solution. In addition, you can take advantage of 1, 3, and 5-year reserved instances to lock in your price. So it means if there's any sort of pricing changes, Microsoft eats the cost, okay? You are locked in with Microsoft. Next, we've got Azure IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So again, a lot of customers already tell us, look, I'm already modernizing. I'm moving my Exchange. I've already moved my SharePoint into M365. But maybe I want to move some VMware VMs into Azure VMs, or maybe I want to move some workloads like SQL databases or web apps from virtual machines into Azure Cloud Native services. A lot of folks are already doing that modernization. Then when it comes to on-premises, we've got Azure Local and Windows Server. Azure Local is great, and really, it's the one I always lead with because, again, at the end of the day, Azure Local and Windows Server use the same core underlying stack, the same hypervisor, the same storage stack, the same networking stack. The difference is Azure Local is managed from the cloud. You don't have to deal with enterprise management. Okay, it's all handled in the cloud for you. We deliver new features, we deliver new capabilities. You just consume it through a port browser window. For those folks that say, oh, by the way, though, Azure Local, it's not going to meet my requirements because I need to use SAN storage. I have fiber channel SANs, I have iSCSI SANs, or I need to reuse some existing hardware. Maybe you have a bunch of Blade servers. Well, Blade servers aren't going to be conducive to a hyper-converged infrastructure. In that case, Windows Server fits like a glove. With broad hardware compatibility for servers as well as storage, we support whatever storage that you have, and we can take full advantage of it. Now, I will say that when we look at these 4 options, typically we see customers choose at least one option on the left. And on the right-hand side, we see customers usually choose one or even both. And here's why they use both. So in the core data center, where SANs are very prevalent, we see customers that say, look, I have my iSCSI and my fiber channel SAN, so Windows Server makes sense for me there. However, I've got 100 branch offices. Well, no one's putting 100 SANs in 100 branch offices. That's cost prohibitive. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. In that case, Azure Local makes a ton of sense. Think about it. You've got 100 branch offices distributed over a region or a country or even the world, and you can manage them all in one place using the Azure portal. So those are the Microsoft options for VMware migration. Finally, here's our call to action, everybody. First of all, if you haven't started evaluating Windows Server 2025, there is no better time than the present. If you're a software assurance customer, you already own the bits. You already have access to them. Please, you should be evaluating, if not deploying already. For customers that don't have software assurance, we have evaluation bits that you can download for free with a 180-day trial period. And Windows Admin Center VMware conversion. So if you're not already using Windows Admin Center version 2410, you should absolutely be doing that. It's got the latest and greatest improvements for performance and scalability that we talked about earlier. And we will have the VMware conversion tool available in public preview in the summer of 2025. You'll see announcements on the Windows Server blog, and of course, I'll announce it on social media. If you're following me, I'm on Blue Sky and Threads at WSV Guy. So with that, just want to say thank you very much. We appreciate having you at the session. It's always fun presenting with Dan and Priya, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the Windows Server Summit.